Hi, this is Blanca with Your Health is Your Greatest Wealth, and I have the pleasure to introduce my very good friend, Irina Makara, who happens to be a certified sleep coach. With a commitment to science-based approaches and a holistic perspective, Irina empowers her clients to optimize both their sleep and overall well-being. Irina, take it away. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you became a sleep coach.
Thank you so much, Blanca, for this introduction. I became a sleep coach because I do have my own sleep story. I started having some sleep problems, some insomnia. As my life became more complex, the stress became the baseline of my life. My sleep got more and more affected. At some point in my life, when I was living in Ireland and I was having like a very stressful job, it was not a matter of if I wake up during the night, is for how long. My problem was I was falling asleep. I didn't have any problem. But in the middle of the night, I was waking up around 2 a.m. and could not fall asleep until 4, 5. And sometimes I was falling back asleep just before my alarm was off. I tried to deal with that as everybody is doing, with just pushing, with willpower, relying on coffee. One day while I was commuting to work, I was on highway and I had an accident because I was so sleep deprived that I had no reactions. That was the moment when I realized that I cannot ignore this anymore. People who are sleep deprived, especially if you have micro sleep, the difference between people who are sleep deprived and drunk is that people who are drunk, they are having low reaction. But if you have episodes of micro sleep, you don't have any reactions. So that's what happened to me. And I was so scared. I wasn't very bad injured or anything, but could have been worse. I could have died. And that was like an aha moment for me, is like, I have to do something with this. This cannot be my life. So it was a struggle, especially because in Ireland, this health system is very weird. And if you're not chronic or very bad, they dismiss you pretty quick. So I knew that if I go to my general practitioner, they will ignore me. So I started taking my health in my own hands and trying to understand, why do I have this sleep problem? In time, trying different things and understanding how sleep works and how my body generates sleep, it helped me to troubleshoot and to improve my sleep. And then I realized I'm not the only one who is struggling with sleep problem. There's so many people around me that they are having the same issue. And I realized that I want to help people. And that's how I became sleep coach, because I really wanted to have an impact on more people.
Something that was a weakness of yours, you were actually sleep deprived. You had a wake up call and you saw that that could be a solution you provided to others that were also dealing with the same sleep deprivation you were. So thank you for sharing your journey on that. Share with us, what did you learn along the way and what has helped you with your sleep routines?
The number one thing that I've learned is that sleep is not an on-off process. It's not that you will work, close work, and then go to bed and expect to fall asleep, especially if you're having a stressful life. So everything you do across the day, during the day, from the moment you wake up till the moment you put your head back to your pillow, it impacts your sleep. So stress is the main component that affects sleep, and a lot of people are having sleep problems because of stress. But there are so many other things, small things that we do across the day that can help or impact in a negative way your sleep. And I can give you an example, from light exposure early thing in the morning to when was the last time you ate before you go to bed. Every little thing that you do adds up and can impact your sleep.
That's interesting. And, you know, I think the conversation around good sleep is happening so much more frequently these days than, say, maybe 10 years ago. I know a lot more people are aware about their sleep hygiene and just trying to shift their habits. like you mentioned, when you eat at night, not eating right before you go to bed. I know the one thing I've been aware of for many years that I think is common knowledge now, but maybe not common practice, is not drinking coffee up to a certain point during the day because the caffeine stays in your body. So, are those the type of recommendations you, as a sleep coach, help your clients with?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my coaching practice, I like to try to explain them why they have to do that. Because as you are saying, common knowledge is not common practice. And a lot of people, if they understand why they have to do this, it will be easier to be compliant. And also, if they understand the underlying mechanism, they will be able to adapt what they have to do based on their own biology or based on their environment or situations. So, for example, in the case of coffee and caffeine, basically what's happening, the coffee has a lifetime. So usually when we are talking about drugs or substances, we are talking about the half-time half-life time. It's basically after ingestion, how long after ingestion half of that substance is still in your body. And of course, this depends on the person. There are some people who are metabolizing caffeine faster or slower, and that can vary from individual to individual. But in general, think about it. If you're drinking a coffee at 2 p.m., let's say at 10 p.m., you'll still have half of that caffeine in your body. And even if you are able to fall asleep, what happens with caffeine is it prevents your brain to interpret the sleep pressure, the sleep drive. So you're falling asleep, but you're not able to go into the deep stages of sleep. So a lot of people come to me and say, I drink coffee and I have no problem falling asleep. But then I follow up with a question, and how do you feel when you wake up? Do you feel refreshed? Do you feel like the first thing you have to do when you wake up, you have to drink coffee to be able to wake up?
I have so many questions to ask you about a few things you said. I don't even know where to start. And I know there's a lot to cover, but I do want to ask you something. Is this a US problem or is it a worldwide problem? And I ask because I have been privileged enough to travel to Europe often, and I know the French oftentimes have coffee after dinner, caffeinated coffee. So, from your experience of dealing with clients with sleep issues, is this just a US problem, a Western world problem, or do you see it everywhere?
No, it's not only an US problem. It's a more modern world or modern society problem.
Okay.
And as I was mentioning, genetics play a huge role in everything, in your health, in your in your biology. Like genetics plays a role. Also, when you think of the French, think of their lifestyle. Their lifestyle is way laid back. Their work day is work week is shorter. Their stress is lower. They cannot imagine having lunch as you go or eating lunch in front of the computer. So when you're applying the same thing to the American population where they're living on the go, living on fast food, having 80 hours work week and always like sometimes like 2 or 3 jobs to maintain a living and stress is, and you add coffee on top of that in the evening, there will be different effects.
Thank you. That is eye-opening, at least for me. You also used a different term, light exposure. Can you explain that a little?
Light exposure. Okay. So when it comes to sleep, there are three systems that are involved in us for being able to generate sleep. One is the sleep drive or the homeostasis, which balances the wakefulness and the sleep. So we have to be awake during the day and we have to be sleepy during the night. So there is a process that balances this two. The second process is the circadian rhythm. And circadian rhythm, every human on the planet evolved around the day and night cycle. So basically our body cannot had all the processes at once because that's very metabolically demanding. So there are processes in our body, they're happening on and off at different certain time. And we have multiple circadian rhythms. Every cell in your body has a circadian rhythm, but there is one master clock that dictates sleep and wakefulness. And our circadian rhythm is not 24 hours. That's why it's like circa means approximately, DM means day. So it's approximately a day. And our circadian rhythm needs external cues to reset. So every morning when you wake up, your circadian rhythm needs to reset, and it starts like a countdown. So it knows when to start releasing melatonin and other hormones. The circadian rhythm needs different external cues to be able to do this reset, and light is one of them. And it's light and temperature are the two most important cues to sync circadian rhythm. So when I'm saying light exposure, meaning you need to see daylight. And that's one of the things that will impact your energy levels across the day and your sleep at night. The number one recommendation that I have for everybody is first thing when you wake up, if there is daylight outside, you can go and have a very short walk. But if it is dark, like right now, like I'm in Seattle, the day is so dark. I often recommend having a light box.
I actually have something similar to that.
So this is a light box used for seasonal affection disorder or SAD. And first thing in the morning when I wake up, I turn it on and I drink my coffee or journal in front of it. So getting light exposure from a light box, that's one way of getting light exposure. The other way is going outside. And even if it is dark and cloudy and forecasted, the amount of light that it's coming from the sun, it is way stronger than all the internal lights that you have right here inside. So my number one advice would be to go outside for a short walk. And it is very important to be in the morning because that's when is the window for our circadian rhythm to reset. After that, it's very hard to reset your circadian rhythm. There is another window in the evening where we can give the circadian rhythm, like the central clock, another cue to say, okay, it's night now, so start releasing melatonin. But early in the morning, get light exposure.
So let's talk about nighttime and what people can do to help their circadian rhythm and what kind of sleep hygiene they need to have at night to help with those cues.
So I'm very glad that you mentioned sleep hygiene because how I said in the beginning, sleep is not an on-off process. So in order to prepare your body, but also your mind to sleep, you have to gradually de-stress, decompress, wind down, and to help your body to enter into that state. But sleep, it's much more than that. It's a very complex metabolic process, and the brain goes through so many different, the brain waves pattern during the sleep, they're like very different. So in order to prepare your brain to sleep, you need to relax and to calm down. And as you calm down, your brain waves will start going down and look more into a sleep state, and then the transition to sleep will be easier. And the problem with the modern society is that we are having so busy schedule that even during the day, you don't have time to process all those emotions and whatever happens to you. And the first time when we have the opportunity to do that is often when we go to bed. So you lie down in bed, you turn off the light, and boom, the whole day, whatever happened to you starts coming back, and you start reflecting. And you do that in bed, and then you get anxious, your heart rate goes up, you start hyperventilating sometimes, and then at the same time, you're realizing like sleep is so important. I need to sleep. And if I don't sleep now, tomorrow I'll be tired. And then you force more to sleep. And the more you force, the more you're anxious. So if you don't have a buffer time, a decompressed time to be able to process all those emotions and thoughts and feelings, to release the tension from the body, then you will be in bed and trying to sleep, and will take you half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours until you are able to fall asleep. And sleep hygiene, it's a set of practices that you do regularly on a regular basis so that you can wind down, right?
You and I have had conversations about
Yes.
this before, and I think I'm like many people that I am very aware of what sleep hygiene is, but again, common sense is not always commonly practiced, and sometimes I fall off my good habits myself. So yeah, take it away. I want to learn more so that we can all start making this common practice.
I don't know if your audience know, but we are both in the same coaching program with Brendon Burchard. And I loved how Brendon came with a very simple rule that it's easier for people to remember very basic things. So he has the 3-2-1 rule, which means 3 hours before bed, no eating. So your dinner should be at least 3 hours before you are in bed. 2 hours before bed, no working. So you are closing all the work. So you have at least 2 hours for your mind to wind down. And 1 hour before bed, no screens. So that's a very high level rule. And when I teach how to build a wind down routine, I like people to think of at least 1 hour before bed to start winding down. And a very important thing is that you should have the same sleep schedule every single day, including weekends. So that's how I start working with clients. We start creating this sleep schedule from the things that we can control. And the things that we can control is when we wake up. It's very hard to control when you fall asleep. But we have a timeline when we want to wake up. Then we count how many hours you would like to sleep, maybe 7, 8 hours. And that's and from there, you plan at least 1 hour for wind down. So we can start from that, knowing that if I want at 10 p.m. to be in bed, then I know that at 9 a.m. I should start winding down. And when we start building a wind down routine, I want you to wind down the brain and the body, because the brain can keep tension and the mind, no, so like the mind and body, not necessarily the brain. Brain is the organ, mind is the expression of that. So the mind and body. So depending on how stressful your day was, you can do some exercises to help you process, like as I was saying, process your thoughts, emotion. You can do things like journaling or to-do list, or if you have anxiety, you can do some exercises like constructive worry exercises where you're thinking about like, what are my worries? And then you have a piece of sheet and you split in two. And on one column, you say, what are my worries that might prevent me to fall asleep? And then on the other column, you're saying, what is one thing that I can do to solve that problem? You don't have to come with the solution, but you can come with one thing that you can do tomorrow or the next day so that you can move towards. That's one aspect, like calming down the mind, but also calming down the body and working with your biology to help your body to be ready for sleep. There are things like light stretching, which can release the tension in your body. Having hot baths, and this is a double-sided benefit. One, it relaxes you, and two, it works with your body temperature. So as I was saying earlier, temperature is a key factor in sleep, because in order for us to fall asleep, our body temperature has to go down. And you will be confused, but like you said, hot bath. Yes, the thing is, when you're taking a hot bath, your extremities, like your blood goes to your extremities, to your capillaries, so that it creates some heat exchange. And by doing that, the blood flow is removed from your core to extremities. And with that, your core temperature goes down. And that's what is important for us. The core temperature has to go down for us to fall asleep. And think about it. How many times did you take a hot bath or a hot shower and then you laid in bed and you napped because you were knocked out, right?
Right. I personally love hot showers at night. And
Yes.
it's part of my wind down, how I practice sleep hygiene, and it works for me. So it's something I've incorporated. I want to ask you a couple of questions. Before I do, though, you mentioned something that I did want to let our viewers know. So Irina and I are privileged enough to be in a mastermind by one of the top rated coaches in the US, Brendon Burchard. I will provide information for that mastermind as well as his online community. That will be in the comments. And I have so many other questions to ask you. I've definitely started practicing a lot of what we learned with Brendon and incorporating what I've learned from you as a sleep coach. You mentioned journaling as well as meditation and all of these mindful practices, which we in the master class try to incorporate. Tell me a little bit more about mindful practices and journaling. Do you recommend something like a sleep journal to track your sleeping habits? I know I asked you a lot of questions.
Yes.
So journaling, meditation, mindfulness practices, how do those help with sleep hygiene?
And I will start by saying something that is a little bit controversial. The thing with meditation is I wouldn't recommend meditation close to bedtime. I
Okay.
would recommend meditation early in the morning, but at bedtime, I would recommend different practices, mindfulness practices. Why is that? Because meditation involves a lot of focus and attention, and that sometimes can be stimulating. So instead of helping you to drift off, it will mm, um, make your brain more aware and more focused.
Irina, can I ask you about that? Some of my most brilliant ideas come when I get into that fantasy state of dreaming. I also have the complete opposite where a lot of my sleep is affected by rumination,
Yeah.
which is what you mentioned, where I guess maybe if you go too deep into your thoughts, they stick with you. So those are two extremes that I do deal with, and what affects my sleep hygiene, even though I know the practices, sometimes that I call it the beehive. The
Yes.
beehives are always going. So several people call it monkey mind. I've always called it beehive, and my beehives go and go and go and go, and it's sometimes hard to get them to settle down.
And that's why a wind down routine or like a buffer time would help you. Do you do anything before going to bed that will help you with processing these emotions or like thoughts?
Like I mentioned, the showers really help. And just to give our audience a little bit, I'm sharing a little bit of me. A lot of my rumination is trauma based, and I encourage anyone that has trauma to work with a trauma specialist, a therapist, a mental health wellness professional. I have done that myself, and it's really helped me. However, I sometimes have those infrequent moments, sometimes with the holidays, because different stresses come up, and they're definitely triggers for some of my trauma where that beehive starts again. So if this is out of the spectrum of healthy sleeping, maybe it falls more into something that
Insomnia.
you might want to delve in, insomnia, where
Yeah.
it's not necessarily sleep hygiene. Take it away.
Yeah. And in this kind of situation, and thank you for bringing that because um, whenever I'm talking about sleep, I want to make the distinction between sleep deprivation caused by incompatible behaviors with sleep and not prioritizing sleep versus insomnia. The causes of not being able to sleep in the two cases are different, and the treatment or the recommendation are different, and sometimes are in opposition.
Mhm.
And for example, for people who are dealing with, I recommend them to work with a specialist. Like insomnia is very hard to be worked on your own. You need help from someone. And I do help people with insomnia. But the thing that we are trying to prevent, the number one thing that we want to prevent is something that is called conditioned arousal. So you don't want to stay in bed if you cannot fall asleep after like 30 minutes and you're still having these thoughts, because then your brain will associate bed with anxiety. If they are episodic and you can revert back to your normal state after the holidays, that's fine. But often for people, this acute insomnia episode can translate later and can evolve in chronic insomnia because they create this association with bed where all those intense emotion. So number one approach when it comes to insomnia, it's cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. And the first thing that we do when we are working with people with insomnia is to ask them to get out of bed and to create a cozy spot where they can relax and they can wind down, or they can address those emotions and thoughts and feeling. And only when they're feeling that they're ready to fall asleep back, they should go back to bed.
Okay.
And another thing that I wanted to mention about insomnia, another type of insomnia is the insomnia generated by the anxiety of trying to get more sleep. So a lot of people are understanding the benefits of sleep, and the social media right now, they're trying to scare people or to use fear tactics to make people to understand the value of sleep, because they are dismissing the importance of sleep. But it's not the people who are dismissing sleep that they're hearing those messages. It's basically people with insomnia that they already know about this. They are already trying to get a better sleep, and they get more anxious, thinking is like, if I don't sleep 8 hours of sleep, then I will develop dementia. And they get more anxious, and then it's harder for them to fall asleep, because sleep does not reward effort. So the more you are trying to sleep, the more it's harder to sleep. So for people who are having insomnia because they are anxious to fall asleep, I would recommend them to reach out to a specialist to help them with that, because it's basically cognitive and behavior restructuring that would help them to relax.
So, Irina, I really appreciate that you brought this up. One of the things that actually troubles me when I watch TV, and I don't watch it often, but it seems like there is so much advertisement for sleep medications. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of times the pharmaceuticals create side effects that are worse than what you're trying to cure. So, for those individuals wanting to improve their sleep that do not want to use prescribed medication or even an over the counter medication, is there something holistic, naturopathic that they can use? Or would you recommend just mainly sleep habits, good sleep hygiene?
I wouldn't say one or the other. I would say a combination of both would help. And if you're taking some supplements, let's say magnesium, or let's say tea, or let's say CBT oil, but you're working until the time you go to bed and you get light exposure and you eat or you have alcohol, it's not going to be as effective. I think there is a combination of both that has to be done in order to provide long-lasting effects. Yes, you can take sleeping pills and you can knock out and fall asleep, but that's a temporary solution.
Mm.
And the sleep medication have been created to be used temporarily, like a crutch while you are working with a specialist to fix your sleep with other practices. But what's happening right now is that they are so overprescribed that people use them long term, like years, and they get addicted and they cannot sleep without them. And even melatonin is so abused nowadays because it's over the counter. And melatonin is not a sleep aid. It helps you only with the sleep onset, but it doesn't help you with staying asleep.
So,
And I want to go back to your other question about sleep journaling. And I also want to touch on sleep tracking devices, because a lot of people are asking me.
thank you. I was going to ask you.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead. Take it away.
as always, there is not like one answer.
No.
The answer is always it depends.
Okay.
So with the tracking devices like the Apple Watch or a Ring, it depends what are you trying to get out of tracking your sleep.
Mm.
And first of all, as we discussed before, people who are having insomnia, like they are getting obsessed with their sleep. I often recommend them not to track their sleep because it causes more anxiety. Another thing that I want to specify about sleep tracking devices is that they're not accurate. Though, like Oura Ring, who is the most accurate sleep tracker on the market, it's pretty accurate, but it's not even comparing with how doctors are conducting sleep studies in the lab. Basically, in the lab, when you go, I don't know if you've tried that. I've tried that multiple times. They put a lot of wires, they put a lot of electrodes on your head to measure your brain waves. They put things on your throat and on your body to see muscles contractions. They put oxygen, they try to measure oxygen in your blood. They try to measure your breathing patterns. So there's so many vital signs that they get to make a guess. Even that is like more a guesstimate of your sleep structure. So think about it like a device that you have on your ring. It does track some of your vital signs. It takes those information, they have an algorithm, and then they generate a prediction on what your sleep was. And depending on that algorithm and depending on which vital sign that device tracker is using, the report can be more or less accurate. And sleep devices are good if you're trying to track more sleep latency, meaning the time you're in bed for the time you're asleep, how much time you were asleep. But when it comes to different sleep stages, they're not as accurate. But if you still want to use them, you can use them as a trending tool. So let's say because you are measuring the data, you are the reference points. You are not comparing yourself with other. It's you can see like, okay, today I'm having 5 hours of sleep. Well, 1 hour is deep sleep, 2 hours is REM sleep, and the rest is light sleep. The next day is like, okay, I have 6 hours of sleep. So you can see trends. Then you can look at your day. What did I do today? I got a walk, I got exposure, I did, or you had a stressful day, and then you see how those affected your sleep. And you can then see patterns and you can see trends and see how your day-to-day life and activities can influence your sleep so you can take action in that direction. I do have people coming to me, is like, I want to get 3 hours of deep sleep. It's like, why? And like then we have a different discussion. Why do you need to have 3 hours of deep sleep? Where did you come up with this number? So it's not getting stuck in the number, but looking at trends.
Right.
And
So is it more important to wake up feeling rested, regardless of how many hours of sleep you get, versus sleeping a very long time in bed, but not waking up rested? And maybe I'm using the word sleep because you're probably not really sleeping if you're not waking up rested.
I love you, Blanca, for this question. I can see that you know your stuff. Yeah, this is called sleep diffusion. It's basically the time you are in bed versus the time you are asleep. And being more in bed doesn't mean you're sleeping more. In sleeping for 8 hours doesn't mean it's a deep and restful sleep. The sleep is not only about sleep quantity, it's about sleep quality as well, right? So often people with insomnia, going back to the insomnia, they try to stay in bed longer to have more opportunity to stay asleep, to be asleep. But that's actually the opposite. That makes more damage because you need to build sleep pressure. And if you're more time in bed, then you're having less time to be awake and to build that sleep pressure. So the biggest traps of sleep pressure is staying too long in bed, napping too much, or trying to compensate for lost sleep. People who had depression, I had depression, so I know exactly how it feels. I stayed so long in bed sleeping, but I was always feeling tired. So sleep doesn't mean that you are feeling rested, or it doesn't mean it's good quality sleep. And also, when we are talking about insomnia, another factor when you're diagnosing insomnia is not only the number of hours that you fall asleep, it's also how you feel the next day. So the perception that you had on the sleep you had, it's one aspect of diagnosing insomnia. And there has been cases where people went to the lab to get sleep studies. The device is recording like a perfect sleep, but they wake up feeling very tired, going to their doctor and said, do you see? I haven't slept a wink. I haven't slept at all. And then the doctor is like, yeah, well, you did. So that's that person, even if he or she were able to generate sleep, because their perception is that they didn't sleep, they are still diagnosed with insomnia. So insomnia is very subjective. It's not only about the quantity of sleep, it's about the perception and how you feel the next day.
I had never heard that explanation before, that a lot of it was perception.
Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. So
Yes.
another deep dive for another day about perception and mindset and stories we tell ourselves.
Oh, that's part of the treatment. The story that we tell ourselves and cognitive restructuring, that's part of the treatment with when working with people with insomnia.
Okay, good to know. Is there something that I did not ask you that you also wanted to talk about with regards to sleeping and sleeping habits?
Yeah. I mean, you're not alone when it comes to sleep. I would highly encourage you to ask for help, and you don't have to go through this on your own. Either if you reach out for help for a therapist, for a doctor, and do not try to push through the sleep deprivation with willpower and coffee. Often people don't remember what it is to be well rested and energized, and their baseline is like a state of sleep deprivation, low energy, and brain fog that they think that it's normal. You can be healthy, energized. You can always be a good sleeper. Even if you had sleep issues for years, give hope on your sleep. You can do this.
I still love that, Irina, because I love the optimism that this is not a lifelong sentence. It is something you can work on and improve and have hope on.
Yeah.
So this is a health and wellness channel, and the goal is helping our listeners make mind shift and habit changes to value their health as their greatest wealth. With that in mind, I would like to gift our viewers with a framework to help them improve their health. What is a strategy, tool, or piece of advice that you can offer to our listeners to help them improve their own health?
I'll give you 5 things, which
Okay.
which are small things. And one thing that I want to mention is a lot of people, when they're talking about sleep, they're especially with health gurus, they start talking about biohacking and like the devices or tools or things to help with their sleep. But my number one thing is like, let's go to the basics. So first, let's cover the basics to do the things that are the most important, the most simple things, but also common sense is not a common practice. But so here are my five things. In our society, there is a badge of honors, especially for high achievers, to say, I sleep only 5 hours of sleep at night and I work and I'm such a busy person. It's like, yeah, you're running on borrowed time until you get adrenal fatigue. And you know what? If you would sleep better, you don't need to work for 16 hours a day. You can do the same work in 8 hours because your brain is more sharp and you have more energy and you don't have brain fog. So make sleep a priority. And my number one recommendation after that is keep the same schedule every single day, including weekends. And that's a hard one, but it's something that it's easy to do because a lot of people are trying to compensate for sleep over the weekend. If they have like if they lost sleep during the week, they sleep more in the weekend. But that creates something that is called social jet lag. You're working on different time zones. During the week, you're 9 to 5, wake up at like 7 until midnight. And then when the weekend goes, is like, oh, I go to bed at 2 a.m. and I wake up at noon. So imagine that you're flying from West Coast to East Coast every weekend. How do you feel that? But keeping the same schedule every day, first of all, it will help you build a wind down routine around that. So you will create habits. It will be easier to stick with your routines and with the sleep schedule. Also, will help your body to anticipate sleep and will start prepping, releasing melatonin. And so your body will be more optimized for sleep. The third thing, and we touch a little bit, it's getting correct light exposure. As I mentioned, light is one of the major cues for circadian rhythm. And the thing is, our modern life is in opposition with how we should. So we are living indoors during the day, either in the office or at home, where we have the lights turned off, there is not enough light coming from outside, when we had to get the most light exposure. And when the evening comes, what do? We turn on the lights. So at the time when we need to be in the dark, we get light. And when we need to get light, we are in a dark environment. So get outside during the day, a little bit in the morning, at lunch, and in the evening. Turn on all the lights in your room if you have an office. Get a satellite box, and in the evening, dim down the lights and avoid blue light as much as possible. And in the morning, get blue light. So blue light is not the evil. Blue light is important, but in the morning, that's when our brain is expecting it to get from the sun. The fourth thing, be active. We've talked a little bit about sleep pressure. The more active we are, the more sleep pressure we are building. So if you're lying too much in bed, if you're sitting too much in front of your computer, you will not have enough sleep pressure, and you'll wake up during the night because it's like, well, you sleep 3-4 hours and your body is like, yep,
So is this where exercise becomes important?
very. And it's not only exercise. Walking, it's as vital as exercising.
Movement.
Movement, yes.
Okay.
The last point is having a wind down routine. As I've mentioned, sleep is not an on-off process. We need to relax our body and to calm down our mind so that we are ready for sleep and be able to fall asleep. Does this help?
It sure does. Irina, you just opened my mind to a lot of knowledge, including I did not know that caffeine had half-lives or quarter lives. So I learned something today. I just knew it was important to stop drinking coffee after a certain time, but I never really understood the why. I am going to give our listeners, our viewers here, a link to your website on this YouTube so that if they have any other questions, they could contact you directly. I loved having you as a guest. I've learned so much from you, not just today, but on our ongoing conversations about sleeping and good habits and the importance of a sleep coach. And will you please come back again?
Absolutely, it would be my pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me. Because like I want to educate people about sleep and to help them. That's my main goal. And
Thank you. So this is again my guest, Irina Macari, sleep coach on Your Health is Your Greatest Wealth. And I am Blanca. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you on our next episode. Bye.
thank you. Bye.